travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Henk boards the mothership to talk his illustrated prose book, Down Highways in the Dark by Demons Driven, now on Kickstarter. Now, come aboard with Traversing the Stars. Hi, Mr. Henk. Thank you for coming to Vertical Stars Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I always start off with a question of inspiration to inspire your love for writing and who your earliest influences.
Probably I don't know if I have one direct inspiration for writing, because there are so many people I like everything from kind of the ideas of like people like Lovecraft to the way that Graham Matheson and even John Steinbeck tell a story. Just so it's kind of an amalgamation of everything I put together, and I tend to take what I think is the best out of each one. It's my subjective opinion, but I like that. I love to tell stories, and I notice it whenever you use something that I've had assignments where like I do comic books and I do magazine cover and everything, but it's people's idea. So the thing I love the most is bringing my own stuff to life. And especially if it's going to be like fully illustrated, not just one picture, but like a whole long story. I really want to bring it to life with pictures, but I want it to be my story. I find when I put other people's stories into storyboard format, it's just I start to lose interest. That might be a personal fault of mine, but.
So, I mean, you've had some experience, at least practicing putting together comic books. This is a prose novel with an illustrated prose novel. So can you tell me the thought process between making this illustrated prose novel and how that differentiates from maybe something you would have written as either a comic book or some other form of writing?
Well, initially, going way back, like I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a writer or an artist. So I thought you had to pick one. And then when I saw the revolutionary like Watchmen and Dark Knight Rises, I was like, you can do both. And so then I was like, that does it. I'm going to be I'm going to follow in the footsteps of like Alan Moore and Frank Miller, and like I'm going to do graphic novels. So I was all on that train, and I was working. I was living in northern Florida where my dad was going to university to get his doctorate, and because it's a college town, there were like local comic stores and bookstores, which weren't that they weren't that prevalent at that time, but they were in college towns. So I'd go there, and there'd be indie artists there, and they'd give me tips. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But by the time I finally made it, on the advice of my art teacher to New York City to interview with DC Comics, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Like, it's the movies that saved them. Otherwise, there would be no comics. So I remember I interviewed, I'm not going to say the guy's name, but the guy was like very negative. He showed him my book, and he goes, this might work in our school, but let me tell you what sells. And he slammed it shut, and he showed me, it was like a double splash page of Superman punching Lex Luthor. And he's like, you want to do this? I was like, no. He's like, we don't have a job for you. That was the whole interview. I mean, he got fired 2 weeks later, but he was head of the Vertigo line at the time. They shut down that line. They're pretty much doing what kept them afloat. And so I remembered those old pulp magazines like The Shadow and Doc Savage and The Spider and stuff like that. And the little illustrations would bring the text to life. So I was like, why don't I do that? But like even bigger illustrations, like comic book splash pages. So that's what I do. That's what I focus on. Like the most dramatic scenes, I want to bring them to life with an illustration.
So you currently have an active campaign for an illustrated prose book called Down Highways in the Dark by Demons Driven. What led to the creation of this book?
What was the creation of the book? Or like
what led to its creation?
Okay, like what inspiration, like, well, I wrote my first book, The Black Seas of Infinity, and I didn't want to stop writing. I kind of got the writing bug off that. And I was like, as I go along, like with everything I write, I get more experience. I feel more comfortable in this posture. I start with people and go, oh, I should bring that into my my prose. So then I started writing short stories, and I love those like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits style, like poignant short stories. So I was like, I've actually been to a lot of places in my life. So why don't I use some of those like personal experiences, but kind of transform them into something that's more like horrific, like, bringing a little bit of like sci-fi elements and horrific elements and like, so, and the ones that I hadn't been to, I was like, all the more excuse to go there. So I made sure I went to Chichen Itza to see the Mayan ruins. I made sure I went to Loch Ness. Unfortunately, I did not see Nelly, but I tried. It wasn't for trying, for lack of trying. But yeah, so all the more reason to like even look more intensely at stuff because I'm like, this is going to be in a book.
So when you're going in all these travels, did you think of the idea first and then find the location, or did you find the location that inspired the idea?
A little bit of both. I mean, like with the Loch Ness is famous for the Loch Ness monster, so it was like I'll just go to some place in the world and like make up a story. It was kind of like, well, this is an iconic place with like some iconic imagery and some folklore behind it. So maybe I'll bring that. Sorry, maybe I'll bring that to life with like my story. So I'll go there. I'll get some reference pictures. I'll hear some of the locals talk about the stories, the common festivals. And I'll put it all together, and that'll like make it more realistic and bring it to life.
I mean, I always wanted to go to Loch Ness. That's one of those like bucket list, vacation spots I always wanted to go to.
By the way, nobody there believes in Nessie.
Really, no one at Loch Ness believes in Nessie?
Yeah, I even think like so. Loch is their word for lake. So the lochs are incredibly deep, like so deep they can't even scan the bottom. And at one point, a lot of the lochs were open via tunnels to the sea. So it's possible that like long dead, or what we thought were long dead prehistoric creatures meet through the tunnels into the lochs, and then the tunnels close and they're trapped there. And I mean, we find prehistoric creatures in the deep sea all the time. We thought they died like a million years ago. We're like, oh, wait, they're still alive. So it's possible that there's something that Nessie is based off of that was along those lines.
The interesting about Loch Ness, obviously everyone goes to see if they can find, Nessie. Is it still worth going if you don't end up seeing him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the closest city you fly into is Edinburgh, Scotland. And Edinburgh alone is awesome. So I just recommend checking that out. But then if you want to go to the Loch Ness, it's a 4-hour trip, but they have guided tours. So you take a bus there, and the whole way up there, like this old Scottish lady narrating. Basically, the whole thing is like, that's the castle where the English raided it and burned it down. That's the castle that we burned down because the English were coming. So it's all a trail of misery and how much they hate the English. But you get a whole history, and basically the bus travels on these little isolated roads through the highlands, so you get to see like ruined castles and like all sorts of like great environment. So it's definitely worth it. And then when you get there to Loch Ness, on the edge of the lake is a ruined castle. So you go through the whole ruined castle, which, by the way, I had no idea how like narrow the hallways are in castles. They're really fucking narrow, But so you go through the whole castle, then you sit on a boat, go across the loch, and there's another ruined castle there. So then you can see another ruined castle. Then you take the bus back.
That sounds awesome. So going back to a little bit down Highways in the Dark. This is a collection of a series of stories within one book. How did this challenge you as a writer, writing all these different stories?
Well, this is the way I approach writing stories. Like, usually I'll like go for like a bike ride or something. Like, I'll do something where you're like kind of like in your own thoughts, where you're exercising so the endorphins are rushing through your head, and then I'll just start thinking about stuff, and all these elements will come together. And I actually use that in my writing a lot. Like, even if I'm writing a full novel, but I'm not quite sure how the transition is going to go, I'm like, let me take a break and go for a ride, and or go for a run or go for a walk or whatever, and it'll come to me. It never fails to come to me. So whenever I kind of think of the core of something, like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, say there were like horrible cosmic creatures in Loch Ness, which is in that story, then, I go for a bike ride and I start thinking, well, how about I add this to it? How about I add that to it? And usually, like, I take notes on my phone, and usually at the end of it, I look at all the notes and I put something together. And I'm like, yeah, that hits.
That's awesome. And the interesting thing too is that all these stories exist within one shared universe. So how fleshed out is the shared universe when you're done with the entire novel? How interconnected are these stories to each other?
Well, I think of it kind of like comic books. Like comic books are all in the same, like, continuity. So, like, maybe like if it's Batman and Superman, they're in the same universe, even if they don't often meet up, even if the same characters don't often interact, they're still like in the same environment. So, like, occasionally you see like little glimpses and little flashes, like, but it's kind of more for like the hardcore fans who are like, hey, I know what that is. Hey, I read that. So it's kind of the same thing with my stuff. It's like all the stories, like, maybe occasionally you see a little glimpse of something, you're like, I recognize that guy, or I recognize that environment, but it's like there one is not necessary for you to understand the next one.
Hmm. So how did you approach the idea of the world building of this universe that you created?
Um, I think a lot of, like, a heavy influence to me was kind of the with the comic book industry. I think is like the great evolution of it. So it kind of like when Alan Moore came on the scene, Frank Miller, and then they brought people with them like Neil Gaiman. So all these people were like changing what comics were. So before that, it was like simple, like, quick morality tales, like Captain America does this, Batman does this, but then became this very complex, like, interwoven, story basically. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So whenever I think of something, I like, in the back of my mind is always like, but I should make it connect a little way. And I think I like that. I like that element.
I think one other thing that's very interesting about your campaign is that you have these illustrations that are connected to it, and they are gorgeous illustrations.
So thank you.
Detailed. There's so much feeling in each image that you show. How long have you been developing your art for?
Well, I was always the art guy. So as a kid, I played a lot of role playing games. I actually didn't play Dungeons and Dragons, but, like, there was like, I like, because I was never, I always wanted to be different. So I played, like, there was one like a sci-fi and different worlds stuff, but I'd always draw everything in those. So I was like very much into like bringing my own characters to life, my own stories to life. And then as time went by and I started asking other people, and I see people who were like commercial artists, and I was like, big that annoying kid asking for tips, and like just trying to like bring more and more out of it. And like the more that I imbibed, like the more I read, and I've read at this point thousands of books, but the more that I like filled my brain with all these ideas, like eventually you just slowly transition from the point of how am I gonna like bring my stuff to life to I have so many ideas, I don't know how I'll manifest all of them.
Now, what interesting is because, like you said, this is not a comic book. This is an illustrated, not a prose novel.
Right.
How did you determine or how do you determine how your art is going to capture the essence of each story that you're utilizing it for?
Well, I realized because I've done some comic books that are kind of like more along the lines of like regular comic books, and it actually gets really boring doing the storyboard. It's like a guy walks down the hall, opens the door. Okay, this is what he sees. I like it when it's like those in comics you call it splash pages, those giant pages where it's like a very dramatic scene where it's like two people fighting each other or you discover something or whatever. And I was like, why don't I do those? Because you don't actually need all that like connective tissue of like, and you can even tell when like people that are my favorites, like John Tolman, when he does like the little like scene by scene by scene sort of pages, like you can tell he doesn't put 100% into it. But when he does the scene where it's like, everything falls apart and everything blows up, you like he does like 130%, So that's what I want to do. And I was like, you don't even really need that, like more like kind of like bland stuff. Like it's very easy for you to picture it if you read the text, and actually it might be like a little bit more interesting because if you read the text, you envision it differently than the artist might draw it. But then the dramatic scenes, if you bring them to life with a cool illustration, people are like, holy shit, and that really pulls them in.
So, how challenging is it to draw something that reaches the imagination of the written prose that you created?
Um, Not hard at all because what I tend to do is maybe this is in part because I'm an artist. I tend to visualize everything. So it's like, and in fact, one of the problems I had when I first started is I'd over describe. It was like, this is the texture of their clothing. This is the color of the clothing. This is what they were. Like, you don't have to do all that stuff. You just need to focus on the important stuff to tell the story. So, but because I visualize all of it and then I like pull parts of it out when I write it, I already know more or less what it looks like. So it's not hard.
Now, there was an interesting quote you put on your campaign, so I'm going to read it to you if you don't mind, and you can let me know your thoughts, okay?
Sure.
You wrote, this is in the campaign. This is a quote by HP LoveCraft that states, "Life is indeed comic, but the joke is on mankind." So, how did you connect that quote with the stories that you tell?
Uh, well, there's a lot of like it's kind of like dark comedy, but it's actually true. So like stuff will happen. We're like, if you just saw it from a totally removed perspective, you'd be like, "That's funny." I mean, it's brutal, it's dark, but it's funny. So, and even to this day, like my favorite comedians like involve themselves in dark comedy. Like one of my favorites is Anthony Jeselnik, and he has this great bit where he's like, "Yeah, I was walking around and saw a baby locked in a hot car." He's like, "I'm not a monster. I threw a rock at the window. Window was down." See, but to me, I was like, "That's hysterical."
Yeah, another one I like a lot is Jim Jeffries. He does a lot of dark
Oh,
and
I like him too. Yeah.
he's really funny. I mean, I think it's fascinating. And when you again, when you think about the story that you created, how wide of a range are they, or do they all kind of follow a similar genre of horror, or are they different types of horror? And how do you, I would say, how do you hit horror or approach horror in prose form? I know also we have like Stephen King does it, like Clive Barker, but there's a specific talent to doing that. What would you say is the key to writing that?
Well, I tried to pick out every artist. So I tried to pick out what I think their best element is. Like Stephen King, very weak endings, but very believable characters. So I want to go with like the believability of his characters. HP Lovecraft, awesome ideas, but I think his prose is a little bit flawed. Like maybe part of it is like of the time, maybe part of it could be a whole bunch of things. But so I love his world building. I love Stephen King's like realism for the characters. Um, I love Clive Barker how he'll just go off the rails. You're like, what the fuck? Oh, he went there. So I try to incorporate little elements of everything to it. One thing I like a lot is I like the way that Graham Matheson structures his stuff. Like this guy who did I Am Legend and From Hell and Serve Echoes. It's like it slowly builds up to you just like, oh fuck. And I like that.
Mm. So your campaign has already hit its goal, so congratulations on that. Well done.
Thank you.
Um, So, what are some of the rewards that backers will get by backing your book?
Well, if I understand if you have very little money, I mean, I went through a phase where I was homeless, so I definitely interested in having very little money. But I just want people to get a hold of my stuff. I wanted it to get out there for people to see it. So I have like ebooks and audiobooks that are like way cheaper than if you bought them online. And then, if you have a little bit more to give, I have like a signed in numbered hardcover where I actually draw a unique illustration in every single one. So yeah, but I have a bunch of stuff. I have some art prints up there. I have like some original artwork, which actually half that's already sold because people seem to love my drawings.
I mean, like I said, they are amazing. The artwork is amazing. I've seen all of it, and it's fantastic. Um, how much art prints do you have left? Do you think? Are you going to be more? Are you going to put up more?
I might put up a few more. I do have so I made this deal with the guy a long time ago because I also tattoo in a tattoo shop, and it was like, hey, can you make some prints of my stuff and I'll tattoo you? So he worked for a printer and he got fired. So this might be a clue, but he made me boxes and boxes of prints. He's like, here you go. I was like, holy shit, that's a lot of fucking prints. And I tattooed him, but so the end result is I have a number of prints. So it's not like I'm running out of prints. But I tried to put ones that were like relevant scenes that were included as a book cover. So the ones that were included as a book cover that I have prints of, I have a lot of.
Now, one thing that always encourages buyers, backers, is when the campaign ends, the time frame between the end of the campaign and when they can receive their goodies. So, what time frame are they looking at from the point of view of campaign ending to when they can expect getting their stuff?
The as far as like ebooks or audiobooks, they'll get it like the next day. Like I can just email it to them, no problem. As far as like original artwork or art prints, or paperback books, so I have everything in stock at my house. So it's pretty much how long it takes the mail to get to them.
So, also backers love to know is what is their money going to like what were they actually backing? So it was this more for printing, is this more for some other element? Like, so what is the key to what their backing is going to go towards?
Um, Everything, but it basically helps me put out more stuff. So
Mm.
like pretty much all the money I make goes right into the books. Like it doesn't go to anything else. But it just helps me get out to more. Like I love to give out free reader copies. I love to get reviews. And what I get helps me buy stuff I don't have. Like the hardcovers, I have to have them printed, so I have to pay for them to print it. And then any additional funds I get go towards marketing my book. So it's like nothing goes to anything but the books.
Mm. And and as you mentioned a little bit earlier, your campaign has hit its goal. There's a lot of people who do campaigns. Most people fail. What's the key to creating a successful campaign? What are some things you got to consider? What are some things that, what are some of the challenges of it? What are some of the successes for it?
I think the biggest challenge is you just have to market it all the time because the thing is like I've noticed because I do lots of stuff. I have a podcast, I do like book covers, I do clothing, I do album artwork, but everything people, a lot of times people don't know about it until it's promoted. So like if it's promoted, people find out about it. If they don't know, it's like, how did you not know about it? It's like, well, you gotta have the mindset that everyone is like dumb and doesn't see shit unless you really, really push it. So push and push and push, and don't give them the option not to see it.
Hmm. So between which dates is the campaign active for?
For how many more days is it active?
Between which dates? Because this will go out probably Friday, but between which dates is the campaign active for?
Uh, I should think that it's like active for 12 more days from today.
Okay. So what's next for you?
Um, I'll see what goes on with this book. I'd love to put out like another signed numbered book. So if that's a big draw, then I'll definitely do that. But otherwise, the whole campaign thing is like, hey, I'd love to put this out. Let me fund it.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put plenty more out. I've already put out 5 books, so I'm not stopping.
Well, like I said, I mean, the book looks fantastic. I've already backed it. So thank you so much. Mr. Henk, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, sir.
Thank you.